My husband died on a Tuesday in March, 3 weeks after he made me promise for the fourth time in our marriage never to go to the building on Clearfield Road. He had always called it a work property, a storage facility he kept for old equipment and files. Boring, he said whenever I asked. Nothing you'd want to spend a Saturday looking at. He was an engineer turned private developer, and I had accepted that some corners of his professional life stayed filed away like tax documents technically mine to access, but never actually opened. His name was Daniel Voss. We had been married for 6 years. He was thorough, patient, and funny in a dry way that took most people a year to recognize. He coached youth soccer on Sunday mornings and overcooked every piece of chicken he ever touched. He was 38 years old when a driver ran a red light on Highway 285 and hit his car on the passenger side at 60 miles per hour. He died before the paramedics arrived. I learned about it from a police officer who knocked on our door at 9 in the evening while I was grading client spreadsheets at the kitchen table. I am a forensic accountant. I am trained to look for discrepancies in systems that appear stable. I find the number that does not belong and I follow it until it leads somewhere. When the officer told me, I set down my pencil, thanked him, and closed the door. Then I sat on the floor of the hallway for 40 minutes without moving. The funeral was 10 days later. My younger sister Cora flew in from Portland. She was 23 and had never warmed to Daniel the way I had hoped. Not because she disliked him, but because she had a habit of deciding things about people quickly, and Daniel had taken longer than she preferred to show his full self. At the reception afterward, she stayed close to me, refilling my water glass and gently steering relatives away when they lingered too long. She was trying, and I noticed. 3 days after the funeral, I sat across from Daniel's attorney in a glass-walled office downtown. His name was Frank Ellery. He was in his 60s, deliberate with his words, the kind of lawyer who paused before answering even simple questions. He slid a sealed envelope across the table. Daniel left specific instructions, Frank said. This was only to be given to you after his passing and not before. Inside the envelope was a single folded letter in Daniel's handwriting. Neat. Slightly cramped, the way engineers write. Rachel, if you're reading this, I'm sorry for the way you found out. I've been trying to figure out how to tell you about Clearfield in person. I ran out of time. The building is yours now. Everything inside it is yours. Please go before you make any decisions about what to do with it. There is a woman named Judith Crane who manages the property. She knows you're coming. The key code is the last 4 digits of your mother's phone number. Trust Judith. Don't trust my brother. That last line was underlined twice. I read it 3 times. Then I looked up at Frank. What's in the building? I asked. That's not information Daniel shared with me, Frank said carefully. What I can tell you is that the deed has been transferred to your name. Property taxes are current. There are no liens. He paused. He also left a video. He recorded it approximately 2 months ago. Frank turned his laptop toward me and pressed play. Daniel looked healthy in the recording. He was sitting at a workbench I didn't recognize, wearing the gray fleece he always packed for cold weather. He looked straight at the camera the way he had looked at me across dinner tables and hospital waiting rooms direct. No deflection. Hey, he said. I know this is a lot. I know you have questions, and I know you're probably frustrated that I'm answering them like this instead of in person. I kept Clearfield separate because I needed to protect it while I was still working through some things legally. Marcus has been pushing to get involved for almost 2 years. He knows the building exists. He doesn't know what's inside. Keep it that way until you understand what you have. Judith will explain. I love you. I'm sorry I didn't have more time. The video ended. Cora, who had insisted on coming to the meeting, sat very still beside me. Who's Marcus? She asked. His older brother, I said. She turned to look at me. You never mentioned a brother. We didn't talk about him much. That was the understatement of the marriage. Marcus Voss was 4 years older than Daniel. Loud in the specific way that expensive restaurants tolerated because he tipped well, and he had spent years trying to insert himself into Daniel's work. He had called twice since the funeral, both times to say he wanted to help manage the estate, both times without being asked. I had thanked him and told him I had legal representation. He had not acknowledged that as a complete answer. Has Marcus filed any claims against the estate? I asked Frank. He's contacted my office twice, Frank said. Nothing official yet. But he's asked questions about the Clearfield property specifically. Cora looked at me again. I picked up the letter and folded it back into the envelope. I need to see the building, I said. The next morning, I drove south out of Denver on Route 85 with Cora in the passenger seat and a paper map Frank had given me on the center console. The property was 40 minutes outside the city, in an unincorporated stretch of Douglas County, where the land flattened and the sky opened up. Former agricultural parcels converted to light industrial use, nothing dramatic from the outside. When I turned onto Clearfield Road, I saw it immediately. A low, wide building set back from the road, maybe 8,000 square feet, with a metal roof that caught the morning light. New windows. A gravel lot recently regraded, a small sign by the entrance that read Vossland Holdings, no other detail. A woman was standing near the main entrance with her arms folded, watching our car pull in. She was in her late 50s, solidly built, with short silver hair and reading glasses pushed up on her forehead. She walked toward us as we stepped out. "You must be Rachel," she said. She extended her hand. "Judith Crane. I've been managing this property for Daniel for the past 3 years. He told me to expect you and that I should tell you everything." Cora leaned against the car, scanning the building. "What is everything?" Judith looked at me rather than my sister. "Would you like to see it first? It'll make more sense than anything I can say out here." The key code worked on the first try. The main entrance opened into a wide corridor with LED lighting that clicked on automatically. The floors were sealed concrete. The air smelled faintly of machine oil and climate control, the kind of clean, functional smell that belongs to places where precise work gets done. At the end of the corridor was a metal door with a second code panel. Judith entered the code herself. The room behind it was a fully equipped engineering lab. I stood in the doorway for a long moment. Workbenches ran along 3 walls. Prototype units lined a metal shelving system, each one labeled with a date and a version number. A row of sealed containers held water samples. I could see the labels from where I was standing. Environmental test results were tacked to a corkboard beside a whiteboard covered in flow diagrams. In the center of the room, raised on a platform, was a unit roughly the size of a residential water heater, fitted with sensors and piping and a digital readout panel. "What is this?" Cora said quietly. "A filtration prototype," Judith said. Daniel spent 4 years developing a low-cost modular water purification system. It's designed to work in areas with contaminated groundwater where infrastructure investment is too expensive for traditional treatment plants. He filed 14 patents. The first 4 have been granted. The rest are pending. She walked to the center unit and rested a hand lightly on the housing. He had 3 municipalities in Colorado in early-stage licensing discussions. He also had a meeting scheduled with an infrastructure investment group out of Washington 2 weeks after the accident. I crossed the room slowly, reading the version labels on the shelf units. "Why didn't he tell me?" I asked. Not accusatory. Genuinely trying to understand. Judith was quiet for a moment. "He told me he was worried about timing. He wanted the patents fully granted and the first licensing deal signed before he brought you in. He said he didn't want you to see something that might fall apart before it became real." She paused. He also said his brother had gotten wind of the project early on and tried to claim co-development credit through a previous company structure they shared. Daniel dissolved that company. But Marcus had been sending letters through a lawyer ever since. Cora sat on a stool near the door. Her expression had shifted from skeptical to something more cautious. "How much is this worth?" she asked. Judith reached into a folder on the workbench and pulled out a bound document. Daniel commissioned an independent valuation 8 months ago, based on the patent portfolio and projected licensing revenue. The low estimate was $11 million. The high estimate, if the Washington meeting had moved forward, was closer to 30. I sat down. There was a long silence. "My brother-in-law has been asking about this property," I said finally. "I know," Judith said. "He called me directly last week. He said he was Daniel's family, and that he had a right to understand what assets were involved in the estate. I told him all inquiries had to go through the attorney." She looked at me steadily. He didn't like that. Cora spoke before I could. "What exactly did he say he wanted?" "He said he had documentation showing he was a co-contributor to some of Daniel's early research. He said the building and the patents might be subject to a prior agreement between him and Daniel. Judith set the folder down. There is no such agreement. I have been through every document in this building twice in the past week. Daniel was meticulous. There is nothing here that gives Marcus any standing. That night, back at our house in Denver, Cora sat across from me at the kitchen table while I read through the valuation report. She made tea and set a mug in front of me without being asked. "You're quiet," she said. "I'm thinking. About Marcus or about Daniel?" I looked up. Both. I set the report down. I keep trying to figure out if I'm angry at Daniel for keeping this from me or grateful that he built something this significant. I can't land on one. Cora turned her mug in slow circles. "You can be both." I picked the report back up. "I know." She watched me for a moment. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to understand exactly what I have before anyone else tries to tell me what to do with it." 2 days later, Marcus called my cell phone. I let it ring through and listened to the voicemail. His voice was warm the way a sales floor is warm temperature controlled and impersonal beneath the surface. He said he had been thinking about Daniel and about the family, and that he wanted to sit down together, just the two of us, and talk through how to handle Daniel's assets responsibly. He said he had some documentation he thought I should see. He said he was doing this for Daniel's memory. I sent the voicemail to Frank Ellery and did not return the call. The next morning, I drove back to Clearfield alone. Judith met me at the entrance and walked me through the lab in detail this time. She showed me the patent filings, the test result documentation, the correspondence with the 3 municipalities. She showed me a drawer in the main workbench labeled, "For Rachel," in Daniel's handwriting. Inside the drawer were 2 items, a USB drive and a handwritten note. The note said, "The drive has everything organized. Start with the folder called Foundation. If Marcus tries to claim co-development, the folder called Counter has every email, every refusal, every document showing he had no role. Use it. You don't owe him a conversation." I took both items to the small office Judith used at the front of the building and plugged in the drive. The Foundation folder contained the full patent portfolio with filing dates, a timeline of the development process going back 6 years, correspondence with the municipalities, and the Washington meeting brief. The Counter folder was equally thorough. 3 years of emails from Marcus making various claims. Daniel's responses, which were always polite and always firm. Letters from Daniel's lawyer rejecting each approach. A detailed memo Daniel had written himself, dated 14 months ago, laying out the history and explaining exactly why Marcus had no legal standing. Judith watched me read. "He built a wall around this project," I said. "He built 2. She said. "1 out of patents and 1 out of documentation." I copied every file to an encrypted drive I had brought from home, then locked the originals back in the drawer. When I stepped outside, the morning had turned cold and bright. The kind of Colorado March day that looks like spring from inside and feels like January the moment you walk out. I called Frank Ellery from the parking lot. "I've reviewed everything on the drive," I said. "I want to move forward on 2 things simultaneously. First, I want you to send Marcus a formal letter confirming that I am the sole owner of the Clearfield property and the full patent portfolio, and that any claims to co-development will be contested with documentation. Second, I want to resume the conversation with the Washington Investment Group. Can you reach out on my behalf?" Frank's keyboard clicked in the background. "I can do both of those today," he said. "I'd also recommend we preemptively file the patent transfer into your name with the USPTO so there's no ambiguity on record." "Do it," I said. That afternoon, Cora drove out to meet me at Clearfield. She was quieter than usual, looking at the lab the way she had been looking at me since the funeral, like she was revising something she had decided too quickly. "I gave Daniel a hard time," she said, standing in front of the prototype unit. "I thought he was closed off. I thought he was hiding things from you because he didn't trust you." "He was hiding things from me," I said. "Yeah, but not for the reason I thought." I didn't answer that. I picked up the valuation report and walked her through it page by page. She asked good questions. By the end, she had her notebook out and was writing things down. "What do you need me to do?" she asked. "I need someone to organize the municipality correspondence and flag anywhere that the timeline was interrupted by Marcus's interference." Judith found 2 instances where an outside inquiry slowed a licensing conversation And she thinks Marcus was behind both of them. Cora sat down at the workbench and opened her notebook. I'll find it. She did. By early evening, she had a clean 4-page timeline showing that in both cases, the municipalities had received unsolicited calls from a representative identifying himself as a co-owner of the Voss patents, asking them to pause discussions until ownership was clarified. The calls had come from a number registered to Marcus's consulting firm. I photographed every page and sent the file to Frank. He responded within the hour. This is interference with a business relationship. It may also constitute fraud if he represented himself as a co-owner without standing. I'm adding this to the formal letter. 3 days later, Marcus texted Cora directly. I found out when she showed me her phone without me asking. The message said, "Hi Cora, I know this is a hard time. I'm worried your sister is being advised by people who don't have the family's interests at heart. I have documents that show Daniel intended for this project to be a shared legacy. I just want to make sure Voss family assets stay in Voss family hands. Can we talk?" Cora read it twice, then set the phone face down on the table. He found my number, she said. He's done this before, I said. He goes around the direct person to find someone softer. He thinks you're softer. She looked mildly offended. I'm not softer. I know. She picked the phone back up and typed a reply. She showed it to me before sending. It said, all questions about the estate go through Rachel's attorney. Please don't contact me again on this. She sent it. Good, I said. That evening I stayed late at the building, sitting at Daniel's main workbench with the full file archive open on my laptop and a yellow notepad beside me. Judith had gone home an hour earlier. The building was quiet except for the low hum of the climate system keeping the prototype room at the right temperature. I was not a grieving widow sitting in her husband's space looking for comfort. I was a forensic accountant working a file that happened to be my own life. The skills were the same. Find the number that doesn't belong. Follow it. Document the path. By 10 o'clock, I had a complete picture of what Marcus had done and when he had done it, and what it had cost the project in time. I had evidence of 3 separate misrepresentations he had made to outside parties. I had Daniel's own memo laying out the history. I had 2 years of rejected legal claims. I sent the full package to Frank with one instruction: prepare for mediation. Frank called the next morning. He's agreed to a mediation session, he said. His lawyer recommended it over litigation, given what we have. They want it private, no press. That's fine, I said. Schedule it. Cora drove up to the building that afternoon and sat with me on the bench outside the main entrance while I told her what we were walking into. The Colorado sky was doing the thing it does in spring where it shifts from blue to gray to blue again without warning. He's going to try to make you feel like you're cutting off family, she said. I know. He's going to say Daniel would have wanted him involved. I know that too. She pulled her knees up and looked out at the road. What are you going to say? Nothing he says I should say, I said. I'm going to show the mediator the documents. She was quiet for a moment. Do you want me there? Yes, I said. But as an observer. You don't speak unless I ask you to. She nodded. Then she said, I'm sorry I wrote Daniel off. I looked over at her. He wasn't easy to read. Neither are you, she said. I'm better at reading you. The mediation session was scheduled for a Thursday morning in a conference room at a downtown firm neither of us had used before. Neutral ground. Frank had confirmed that no press would be present, and that the mediator was a retired civil court judge with a reputation for cutting through delay efficiently. When Cora and I arrived, Marcus was already in the room. He stood when we entered, wearing a dark suit and an expression that had been calibrated to project concern. His lawyer, a younger man in wire-frame glasses, rose beside him. Rachel, Marcus said, moving toward me with his arms slightly open. I shook his hand and sat down. Frank took the seat to my left. Cora sat against the wall behind me. The mediator was a woman in her early 70s with short white hair and the particular patience of someone who has heard every version of a family dispute and remained unimpressed by all of them. She introduced herself as Judge Harmon, explained the process in 3 sentences, and told Marcus he could begin. He told a story about brotherhood, about being Daniel's sounding board for 20 years, about late-night conversations where Daniel had shared early ideas, about a verbal agreement made years ago that this work would be a joint legacy. His voice stayed warm and measured throughout. He produced a single piece of paper, a printed email from 7 years ago in which Daniel mentioned, in one sentence, that he had been thinking about water infrastructure and would value Marcus's thoughts. That's an invitation for input, I said when he finished. Not a co-development agreement. Marcus's expression shifted by a fraction. Rachel, I understand you're grieving. I'm grieving too, but there are things Daniel told me in private that weren't captured in formal documents. Everything significant Daniel did was captured in formal documents, I said. He was an engineer. That was the way he thought. I opened the first folder and slid a printed copy across the table. This is Daniel's own memo, dated 14 months ago, explaining that you had no role in developing the Clearfield project and that your claims of co-contribution were without basis. He wrote it himself and had it notarized. Marcus's lawyer leaned in to read it. His expression gave nothing away, but he touched his client's arm. I slid across the next document. This is a 3-year record of your legal claims against the project and Daniel's rejections of each one. Then the municipality timeline. These are 2 instances in which representatives from your consulting firm contacted municipalities in licensing discussions with the Voss patents, identified themselves as co-owners, and asked the municipalities to pause proceedings. That is misrepresentation, then the emails. And this is a complete record of your contact with Daniel from the time he filed the first patent through the time of his death. There are no exchanges that establish shared authorship. There are many that establish the opposite. The room was quiet. Judge Harmon looked at Marcus over her reading glasses. Mr. Voss, she said, do you have documentation that contradicts any of what's been presented here? Marcus's lawyer was already whispering in his ear. Marcus looked at me with an expression I had seen once before on a client I had audited who had watched the discrepancies line up one by one, and finally understood that the numbers were not going to rearrange themselves. These are Daniel's documents, he said quietly. He put his version in writing. That doesn't mean it's the complete picture. It's his picture, I said. And it's mine. You don't have one. Marcus's lawyer set his pen down. If you'd like, Frank said, we can outline the terms of a withdrawal. Your client withdraws all claims, issues a written retraction to the 3 municipalities he contacted, and agrees to make no further contact with the Voss patent portfolio or related assets. In exchange, we won't pursue the misrepresentation claims civilly. The lawyer consulted with Marcus in a low voice. Marcus kept his eyes on the table. Judge Harmon let the silence run. Finally, Marcus looked up. He looked older than he had when we'd walked in. Fine, he said. Draw it up. Cora stayed quiet the entire session, I noticed. Outside the building, in the thin March sunlight, Frank tucked the signed documents into his briefcase and said he'd file them by end of day. He shook my hand and caught the look on my face. You built a very clean case, he said. Daniel built a very clean record. Together they didn't leave much room. That was the point, I said. He left first. Cora stood beside me on the sidewalk with her hands in her jacket pockets. You didn't raise your voice once, she said. There was no reason to. She looked at me sideways. He tried to make it emotional and you just kept handing him documents. That's how you beat it, I said. You don't argue the emotion. You show the math. She laughed once, a short surprised sound. Daniel really did marry the right person. We walked to the parking lot. The agreement was signed. The patents were clear. The Washington meeting was being rescheduled through Frank for the following month. The municipalities would receive formal notices correcting any confusion Marcus had planted. There was still work ahead. The licensing negotiations. The decisions about how to develop the project and whether to take on investment. Judith had a list of operational priorities for the building that I had promised to review by the end of the week. On the drive back out to Clearfield that afternoon, Cora in the passenger seat again, I thought about the conversation Daniel had recorded 2 months before he died, the way he had looked at the camera like he was looking at me. I had been angry at first, at the silence, at the years of careful separation between our shared life and this thing he had built alone. The anger had been real, and I had not pretended otherwise. But somewhere in the weeks of working through it, the anger had reorganized itself into something I recognized from my professional life. The feeling of following a number through a system and discovering that the discrepancy you expected to find wasn't fraud. It was a protection built by someone who did not fully trust the structure around him but fully trusted you. He had been wrong to keep me out so long. He would have known that if he had lived long enough to tell me about it. He had said as much in the letter. He had run out of time to fix it himself and left me the tools to finish what he started. I pulled into the Clearfield lot and cut the engine. The building sat the same as it had every morning, low and functional, and entirely unremarkable from the outside. Inside, it was 14 patents, a working prototype, 3 open licensing conversations, and a drawer with my name on it. Judith came out to meet us, the way she always did, reading glasses on her forehead, folder under her arm. "How did it go?" she asked. "He signed," I said. She exhaled through her nose. "Good. Because the Washington group confirmed this morning. They want to meet in person on the 22nd. Cora looked at me. I looked at the building. "Then we have work to do," I said. We walked inside together. The lights came on automatically the way they always did. The prototypes sat in their labeled rows. The whiteboard still had Daniel's flow diagrams on it, slightly faded. The marker traces of someone who had spent years thinking through a problem alone and had finally found a way to hand it forward. I picked up a marker and added a new line at the bottom. Cora pulled up a stool without being asked. Judith set the folder on the workbench and opened it. Outside, the Colorado sky shifted from gray to clear and back again. The building hummed with the steady work of systems doing exactly what they were designed to do. I had not solved grief. I had not closed whatever the distance was between who Daniel had been at home and who he had been out here. That was still somewhere ahead, in the ordinary accumulation of time and small decisions that grief eventually settles into. But I had understood what he left me. I had protected it the way he hoped I would. And I was sitting in the room where he had worked alone for 4 years, making it into something neither of us would have to carry in silence anymore. That felt, for now, like exactly enough.